Hi, and welcome to Sociology. We're going to look at part 2, so we're carrying on for part 1 on crime and deviancy. We're going to look at how sociologists classify crime. And we're going to look at crime statistics and who commits crime. And we'll touch on the criminal justice system as an overview. So here we go. We'll begin with, how do sociologists classify crime? Sociologists categorize crimes based on how they are committed and how society views the offense. So there's 4 types: street crime, occupational crime or white-collar crime and corporate crime, organized crime, and political crime. There is a somewhat newer category called cybercrime. You can check out in the box 8.2 in your sociology textbook and the new media. The growth of cybercrime from the text, page 209. So let's look at each category. We'll start with street crime. When you think of crime, these are likely the categories that you usually think of. Violent crime like murder, sexual assault, and the like. Property crime, break and enter, and theft. Moral crimes, including prostitution and illegal gambling and illegal drugs. The second is occupational or white-collar crimes, consisting of illegal activities committed by people in the course of their employment or in the dealing with financial affairs. And some of the key elements here are a violation of the position of trust in a business or government. Corporate crimes are illegal acts committed by corporate employees on behalf of the corporation with its support. Some of the examples of that would include antitrust violations, false advertisement, infringements on patents and copyrights, and trademarks. Now, some of the costs, well, corporate crime exceeds that of street crime. Tax evasion can cost in the neighborhood of 300 billion, that's with a B, a year in Canada. Now, you may not be familiar with the Calgary Bre-X gold mining company, but it lost around 5 billion of shareholders' investments. A geologist who worked for the company had salted is in bracket. It means that you've tampered with a core sample to make it appear as if gold exists. It didn't, and those people lost their money. Automobile or computer repair shops doing unnecessary work or charging for it fits within this. Occupational accidents and illnesses were the 3rd leading cause of death in Canada. Some of the causes are unsafe work environments. The 3rd group, organized crime, and it's a business operation that supplies illegal goods and services for profit. For example, drug trafficking, prostitution and liquor and cigarette smuggling, loan sharking, money laundering, and large-scale theft like truck hijacking. Very popular. Truck hijacking, one of the most popular trucks to hijack are trucks with food, in particular cheese, and in particular specialty cheeses. Some of the elements that are included in this, they're not centrally controlled organization when you think of crime. The public demand for cheaper goods really encourages the crime. The deadly nature. Biker gangs in Montreal have resulted in many deaths. There could be links to other these organized crimes can be linked to legitimate enterprises. Some terrorist groups use Muslim charities to gather illicit funds for nefarious ends. ISIS uses oil sales from overtaken oil fields to the tune of $50 million per month. Then the last group, the 4th group, political crime. It's the illegal or unethical acts involving the misuse of power by government officials or the illegal and unethical acts perpetrated against government by others attempting to influence or overthrow said government. We've had a recent incident of that in Canada. can include kickbacks, insider deals, and fraud to benefit themselves. Now, this is how crime is categorized. However, crime is difficult to measure. Sometimes it's affected by whether a person reports a crime or not, whether the reports are accurate or not. The primary source of information on crime is police statistics and victimization surveys. So we're going to get into crime statistics. Official crime statistics provide important information on crime. However, the data reflects only those crimes that have been reported to the police, and that will come back frequently in this particular chapter. People are more likely to report a crime when they believe that something can be done about it. And the number of crimes reported to the police, Canadian Uniform Crime Reports, that's the CUR, are just the tip of the iceberg when compared to all the offenses that actually are committed. Now, the victimization surveys and anonymous self-reports of criminal behavior have made researchers aware that the incidence of most crime is substantially higher than reported by the CUCR, or the Canadian Uniform Crime Reports. One survey found that less than 31% of the victimizations are reported by the respondent have been reported to the police. So if only 30%, roughly, have been reported, that means 70% is unreported. With both kinds of statistics, a more true picture of the reality of crime is possible. The accuracy of the CUCR is greatest for very serious crimes such as homicide, which is almost always reported, and for crimes like auto theft, where a significant loss can be replaced by insurance if the crime is reported. Available statistics do not provide any information about victimless crimes, such as drug use and illegal gambling. So who is more likely to commit street crime? Well, what are the correlates of street crime? Correlates don't mean cause. Correlates just mean that in relation to street crime, these other elements are related. Not necessarily cause and effect, but they occur at the same time. They correlate. So what are the correlates of street crime? Well, it's important to note that correlates are not causes. Causes and effect, that's not what they are. Correlates are just means that when this happens, these other things are there as well. No attachment of cause and effect. For example, there is not a cause for poverty. There are many correlates. Unemployment could be a correlate. Low income, divorce, but they're not causes. However, one, two, or more correlates when or where poverty is. These correlates are also there. Therefore, they affect poverty in some way. And crime works that way. So we're going to look at some correlates to crime. Age is a correlate to crime. It's one of the most significant factors. One of the patterns that exists in crime is that arrests increase from early adolescence, peaks in the early adulthood, and then there's a steady decline with age. This pattern reveals that crime is a young person's game, that as we get older, we don't tend to commit as many crimes. That doesn't mean that as we get older, no old people commit crimes, just not as many as young people. Common in all societies where data is available. Well, why is that the case? Well, in adulthood, it's a time of expected conformity. We've learned a lot about what the rules are, and we tend to stick to them a little bit better than we may have when we were younger. Also, just simple aging, maturation process seems to be relevant, and we just don't do that as much as we get older. So age is a factor. Gender. This is another one that has most significant factors. The pattern is that most crime is committed by males. Males make up over 80% of those charged with a crime. They are more involved in violent crime and major property offenses. However, there is a narrowing of this gap. From 1968 to the year 2000, the percentage of offenses committed by women increased from 9% in 68 to 17% in 2000. Social class is another correlate. Lower class people are overrepresented in arrest and prison admission. So why might that be? Is it because they commit more crime, or is it that they're more likely to be the target? Suicide, alcoholism, mental illness, and drug addictions are more common in lower class. These are also correlated. On the other hand, occupational and white-collar crime, costing Canadians more than street-collar crime, is higher among middle and upper class. Race and ethnicity is also a correlate. U.S. stats. We're going to get to Canadian in a minute. African American and Hispanic people are more likely to be to commit street crime than others. In Canada, non-Aboriginal visible ethnic minorities were underrepresented in federal correctional institutions. Indigenous people, many studies have shown that they are overrepresented in prison. Now, should a crime be committed, an arrest made, the criminal justice system is what a suspect is going to experience to determine innocence or guilt. Sentencing. The criminal justice system includes the police, the courts, and the prisons. However, it's not a large, complete, and unified system. Rather, it's a collection, somewhat interrelated and semi-autonomous bureaucracies. Let's break it down. The police. Their function is that they are concrete extensions of the state. Now, the state, by our definition in sociology, just means they are the extension of the government to provide social order. Now, this is extended to maintain peace in the community. They have a broad range. Finding lost children, counseling crime victims, notifying the next of kin in fatal accidents. But what ties these diverse functions together? What makes the police functional in a community? Well, they are open 24/7. They interact with many diverse people in the community. It's called community policing. And are familiar with what helps are available in the community services. They have authority and are backed by non-negotiable force if it's necessary. And 3, they have a high degree of discretion. They can decide whether they will give somebody a ticket or not, depending on the circumstances. The second group we'll look at is the courts. The court's function is that they decide the guilt or the innocence of those accused of committing a crime. The process involved in the courts is known as an adversarial process. That just means there's one side versus another side. One side is the prosecutor, a lawyer who represents the state or the government. The defense lawyer asserts that the accused, the defendant, is innocent. And then, of course, the judge or the jury, they are involved with the final decision as to whether the guilt or the innocence of the defendant is there. Now, there are some alternatives to court, and one is borrowed from the indigenous communities, and it's a restorative justice component, in where it seeks to return the focus of the justice system to repairing the harm that was done to the victim and the community. Some of the elements that are involved, the involvement of the victim and the other members of the community as active members of the process. It's aiming to reconcile offenders with those who they have harmed, and its roots are in these more traditional societies as indigenous. Prisons would be the next approach that is in our more traditional format of our justice system. In prisons, punishment is the essential concept there. Punishment is an action designed to deprive a person of things or value, and that includes one's liberty, because of some offense the person is thought to have committed. We send people to jail for several reasons, whose goals may often conflict. One of the reasons is retribution. punish for their crimes. Incapacitation, to retain them from committing more crimes. Rehabilitation, to change offenders so that they can return to community as law-abiding citizens. Deterrence, to instill fear of punishment to reduce future crimes. Well, that wraps up our overview of crime and deviance. I hope you enjoyed that. We'll be moving into next week and looking at global stratification as it affects Canada. And we'll do that one in 2 parts. That'll be in week 12 and week 13. All right, everybody. Good luck, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.